Welcome to the program. We have four distinguished gentlemen, that's the title of the show today, who are vying for the seat of Councilor at Large. Two of them are already there and would like to stay there, and the other two would like to say hello to it for the first time. Let's introduce them left to right. First, Mr. Sullivan, who is Councilor at Large presently. Mr. Lucas.
Hello.
Mr. Quinn.
Good morning, Ron and Kevin.
Mr. Petty, longtime councilor.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone.
Remember, those things are your friend, so I make sure I talk right into them. So
Yeah,
the folks
they are your friends.
at home, I know there's a camera here also, but very important.
That's the voice of News Director Kevin Tachi.
I'm sorry.
He's perfectly fine. He and myself will vote over the
guide.
guide.
Little guide.
There are no opening statements. There are no closing statements.
Time. No,
There's no time. There's no time. There are no questions. Just talk amongst yourselves as we bring up various issues and let the public know how you feel about things so that they can make a decent decision come November. We're also being videotaped by Brockton Community Access, Brockton Community Cable Television, and like 5 other titles with that thing, too. That runs a couple of thousand times a week. So you have plenty of opportunity.
Like on loop.
Yeah.
It is on a loop.
That's not bad.
And Mike Pava is our
Mike Pava,
producer.
we're gonna give Mike-
Wonderful man. A wonderful man.
He's been our guy
covered
throughout.
everybody? I think so.
Yeah.
You can listen to this conversation on ronvandam.com, not to give myself a plug, but it's a wonderful website. And you can hear the whole thing later this afternoon. Sure it is. So you go there for that. Okay, let's begin. How you doing, by the way?
Pretty good, yourself.
Wonderful.
Do you think that gentleman have some fruit?
Yes, would you like an apple? Could be the last one you ever have. It's very tasty.
Very shiny.
Brockton Community Access gave us those apples.
Very nice.
Very, very nice. Yes, and the end table as well. Is the boom mic out of camera range? Good. Okay. And Mr. Quinn knows that joke. Okay. Okay. Let's talk. Congratulations on getting as far as you have gotten at this point.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Why beat around the bush? How about this power plant thing?
Oh my God.
There are, I believe, 3 gentlemen who are opposed to it and one that is in favor of it. Last week we had a 2-2 situation. How long have you been for it, against it? Did you change your mind?
And is it really a topic in this race?
I think without question it's a topic, and it's been a topic for a few years now. I know, we talked about it in '07, and I talked about it last year when I was running for state representative. And you know what? I think it's an important topic, and we need to keep talking about it because at the end of the day, in my view, and a vast majority of my colleagues on the council, a vast majority of Brocktonians, it's not right for the city of Champions. I took a day off of work a while back, back in '07. And I went up to Londonderry, New Hampshire, because they were saying it's going to be really the example of what's going to be illustrated in Brockton. It's apples to oranges. It's up in the woods up there. It has no relationship to Oak Hill Way. So at the end of the day, to say that is misleading in my view. I've said this, and I'm going to continue to say this, win or lose, it's not right for the city of Champions. You're putting a price tag on health and safety. It's very short-sighted to say it's going to be a windfall of cash. It's going to be a multitude of jobs. They're short-term jobs. They're not guaranteed to be Brockton jobs, and they're fuzzy numbers. If you crunch the dollar amounts, they're saying it's not appropriate. But if you look at green technology, which is the wave of the future, harness the sun, harness the wind, that's the way to go. Not a gas-fired diesel backup. It just doesn't make any sense. It's a dinosaur.
I'm kind of new to the race in terms of running for office, but I followed the issue a little bit, but not as deeply as in the past months since I became a candidate. So I took a lot of time to research both sides of the issue. I actually sat down and met with people from Advanced Power / Brockton Clean Energy, sat down and met with individuals from Stop the Power, and did a lot of research. And it was right about the time that the deciding board decision came out that I made my decision that I wouldn't support the plant. One of the things that I took a lot of pride in is that I took the time to actually do the analysis, and I sat down with both groups, and to the person, each one of them had said, and it's all due respect to all the counselors and the candidates that I had asked most questions, and a lot of them had to come back to me for some of the answers. So in my mind, I come to the same conclusion that it's more of an economic analysis than anything else. I've been involved in the energy industry for the past 5 years. I see the direction that the energy industry is going in. The state has put guidelines for renewable energy and goals that they want to meet. The federal government has done that. The EPA is starting to regulate greenhouse gases. And in the industry in and of itself, the push is towards renewable. And without getting into a long dissertation about the energy market, it's changing to the point right now that a lot of gas-fired generators are getting out of the market or are not able to push their projects forward. So in my mind, as somebody who wants to see the city progress for the next 5 to 10 years and really be on the cutting edge, a fossil fuel plant does not necessarily make sense in my mind. I think it's more like you're pushing an 8-track manufacturing plant in a CD or digital world. So, I honestly don't believe it's going to be an economically viable project.
I've been curious about one thing. Maybe you can clear it up. You were the person that put out this mysterious how to make Brockton better.
The Brockton plan.
And we were hiring detectives and stuff to try to find you.
Yes.
And so you obviously put a lot of thought into that and then eventually ran, and you say that those two situations were connected. But in thinking about how to improve the city, the issue of the power plant had never, were you aware of the issue?
Oh, yeah, I was aware of the issue. But one of the things that I focused on the plan specifically was about things that over 5, 10, 20 years that have gone on in the city that have been barriers to the city moving forward. One of the things, I do think it's an important issue because it's a political issue and it's a campaign issue, but people are not moving out of the city because of the power plant. They're moving out of the city because of crime and safety, or either they feel for some reason that there isn't economic growth, there's no vitality in the downtown. People are moving out of it because some of the people are trying to take advantage of the tax credit. The things that have changed, that have stopped Brockton from growing and progressing aren't the things that happened over the past 2 years. The things that we've been dealing with over the past 20 years. We still have less than adequate a number of police. We still have, a downtown that looks the same pretty much than what it did in the mid-'90s, and you still haven't progressed economically. So we still deal with those same issues in the city, whether it's one business coming in, with a promise of jobs and economic fortune.
I actually have it. I want to kind of go on in the direction, and anybody can. And again, guys, this isn't just a Q&A for each guy. You guys can talk amongst yourselves if you have a question of another candidate. And you just brought up something as far as being able to afford police. We've been fortunate where the last fiscal year, your police and fire department were able to work with the numbers, and we didn't see any big time numbers of layoffs as far as like other cities like New Bedford or Fall River. We were fortunate, at least to this point. What do you see as an idea, Mark? You have a plan that you've put out as far as wanting to see some kind of growth economically. What do you guys see as far as whether it's the power plant or some other kind of entity to bring in tax revenue so we can be a little bit more self-sustaining and not have to worry about the state for revenue?
I don't want to have to rustle you outside or anything, but I want to continue on the power plant thing. Mark went a little bit off it, which is fine. But
Well, that's great, Ron. I think it's good to stay on topic, and
on
absolutely.
top of that, because we are radio, the first gentleman to speak was Mr. Sullivan.
Yeah, Mr.
That was
Lucas
Mr.
was
Lucas who
next.
just spoke. Mr. Quinn is apparently going to speak now.
Yeah, I've been against the power plant since the beginning of this round of the power plant for the last 4 or 5 years, and also way back 10 years ago or so, they tried to come in here and do that again. And I wasn't politically active then, but I was definitely against it back then. Fossil fuels is not the way to go. For all the reasons that Bob and Mark have talked about, if you've enlightened yourself on the knowledge that's out there about fossil fuels and where the economy is going to be going with fuel creation and disbursement, you'll understand that it's about renewable energy, not investing in something that's going to be archaic in less than 50 years. And yes, you know what, there will be quick economic gains, but they're not going to be sustainable. They're not going to last. Right now in Plymouth, they're going to build a $550 million film studio complex. Those are going to be 2 years' worth of carpenter jobs, metal jobs, electrical jobs, okay? And those jobs are going to segue into the film industry. They're building a huge complex there where 70% of it's already rented out. Now, I know I'm in film, and a lot of people here aren't, but I know that industry. And that's an industry that we can attract instead of these fossil fuels. And renewable energy, we could talk for hours about this. We're beating a dead horse, okay? And yeah, you know what? We have to beat this dead horse until it's buried. So yes, this power plant will never get built in the city of Brockton as long as I'm elected city councilor in Brockton.
And Mr. Petty?
Yeah, good morning. Thank you very much. I couldn't disagree with my colleague Bob Sullivan and the two challenges in this room. After looking at all things considered, and then realizing the issues of the components of the complexity and intricacies of a power plant that I didn't understand. And once I did my homework, and once I sat down with those who are qualified and those who are certified to give their opinions to boards who make public policy, that was enough to give me the understanding that it's a safe, clean plant. I too went up to Granite Ridge up in Londonderry, and it is right next to a yogurt manufacturing facility. And when I went up,
it's not Oak Hill Way. It's not Oak Hill Way.
But you have Sydney's Kitchen, so it's kind of...
You know, Tom makes a good point about state agencies making decisions, right? And absolutely. But hold on.
Just let me finish my point. Let me finish my point. And the first thing I noticed is when I was in Londonderry going to Granite Ridge, the yogurt plant was right next door to it. And the industrial fans and the industrial components on top of the yogurt factory were very, very loud. So if you're talking about noise in an area, that's noise. And then I went through the whole plant, and the plants are so complex. I mean, just the detail work in the control room. It reminded me. I served on USS Tarawa and I served on the USS Puget Sound while I was in the Navy. And these plants are run by gentlemen and women who went to Mass Maritime Academies or have naval experience. And this reminded me when I was in the Navy and the monitoring that takes place, and everything is controlled, and but primarily, and the most important thing, it's a clean, safe project. It's going to create jobs in the tax revenue that the city will see from this. You can't get it from anywhere else. And just as a point of example, New England Telephone is the city's largest taxpayer, a little under $1 million a year. Walmart up on Oak Street pays the city about $400,000 a year. Lowe's at Westgate Mall, a little over $300,000 a year. All things considered, with the proposed power plant, it's going to be several $1 million. So those three large businesses combined don't equal the potential revenue.
But what are we looking at as far as a dollar? Do we know a revenue amount?
Well, the minimum of,
because I hear different numbers. And
well, a minimum of $1.5 million in taxes alone, just from the facility, just from the plant being there, is worth $1.5 million to the city. And now the number has been floating around $500,000 for water. That's just a starting point. That number was put out. Actually, I don't know who came up with that number, but that number could increase. That number could be $1 million. So the potential to help the city revenue-wise is incredible, and it's unmatched. And this will be the largest project in the city probably since the 1890s, when we abolished grade crossings for the trains, and when we started the inward flow system for inland cities in the United States for sewerage. I mean, this is a major project that the city hasn't seen since the 1890s.
We could also put a nuclear power plant or a coal mine. We could do a lot of stuff.
Well, we're
not talking about Ron.
This is.
Well, we're not talking about nuclear. We're talking about Ron. You got to stay on point. You got to stay on point. Yeah. We're talking about gas. We have the Algonquin pipeline that comes right down. It terminates.
You're talking about bringing money in, but that doesn't mean that anything that brings money in is necessarily a good thing.
Anything that is regulated, anything that is regulated and certified, and persons are certified and authorized, and they have the education in order to pass on, just like in the FCC.
So, gentlemen, I think
you talk about regulation and stuff, and in Brockton, it's a history that we don't really have regulation.
I think
code enforcement, any regulation. We had a building commissioner for the last 6 years who wasn't even state certified. And yes, the state boards all said yes to this power plant, but let's face it, they're in existence to say yes to these things, okay? If there weren't power plants built, there wouldn't be a regulatory agency, all right? And here's the thing, renewable energy is the future, okay? I don't want to bring Brockton back to the 1890s and talk about grade crossing. We've done amazing stuff since then, and I want to continue doing amazing stuff. That's the whole thing. And the other thing, though, too, hold on, tax revenue, comparing power plant to Walmart's, and what else did you compare it to? Which is a great analogy. I understand, but you're using the methodology of stores like Walmart. I don't want more Walmarts, okay? I remember being 7 years in the 7th grade, right, and seeing Home Depot, which is a great company, absolutely, right? And I knew exactly when they moved into the city of Brockton that all those hardware stores stores on the north side of Brockton when it closed down, and they did close down, and that did hurt Brockton. And what it comes down to is small business. We've got to start attracting small business and larger businesses that won't be polluting like a power plant, like the film industry, possibly biotech, other industries like that. And I'm sure there's other ones out there that I don't know about, that you don't know about, but they're out there. And we've got to make Brockton attractive for those industries.
Sullivan.
Thank you, Pat. The role of a city councilor is to serve. We're public servants. We serve the people, every person in Brockton. 7 wards, 28 precincts. And I think the basis of democracy, and Todd, you and I can agree to disagree on this because I do not support this. I never will. It's unwavering. You need to look at the health statistics. The number 4 in the Commonwealth of asthma for children is here in the city of Brockton, number 1. Number 2, if you look at Oak Hill Way, okay, you have 2 schools, the Davis and the Gilmore. You have the Campbell high-rise. You have Plain Street, which is a major street. It just doesn't make any sense in terms of it's a short-sighted viewpoint. Long-term, first of all, you can be exposed to something, a contaminant. I filed the resolve. I had Stop the Power people came in. You filed the resolve, and you had the proponents, Advanced Power. I also recently, with my colleague Linda Balzotti, filed the resolve, and we had the wastewater treatment people come in to find out what is the particulate matter. What is coming out of those stacks, and would it be enhanced in a negative way if this proposal came to fruition? I say it will be. The people in Boston don't live in Brockton, so it's easy for them to sign off on it. But the only good thing that they did, and thank God that they did, is they gave local authority. The zoning, the planning, and conservation, true Brocktonians have a vested interest, and we can shoot this thing down. And I will continue, win or lose, to fight this thing. It's not right. I'm a parent. It doesn't make sense.
And one of the things you brought up, Ron, is my plan, the Brockton plan, and why I didn't include that specific issue in the plan, because I truly don't believe, and I know we've had a spirited debate about this one topic, but it's one business that's getting permitted in the city. There are thousands of businesses that are here that we can that aren't getting as regulated or aren't getting the look that they should. We have an industry here in a space, in a workforce that is ripe for manufacturing, that does lend itself to some extent to green manufacturing, not necessarily to biotech or nanotech, because we don't have the workforce for that. We definitely don't have the space, but we do have the infrastructure for that. So I think the focus needs to be, what's your plan to grow the economy in the city? Right, because you need to expand the tax base, whether it be residential or commercial, and you also need to bring the mass into, particularly the downtown, so that you can actually have a vibrant workforce and actually have restaurants and businesses that are growing, that are bringing people here to the city, that are bringing new energy to the downtown.
I guess where I want to kind of see where everybody stands, in my opinion, with the siting board, I thought they split the decision, where they said, okay, we think that it's okay, but we're going to let the city of Brockton decide where this stands. So they basically kind of took a hands-off approach, so to speak. And I guess what I'm trying to say is you had brought something up earlier about as far as health. And I know that the city right now is fighting this in the Supreme Judicial Court and asking them to look at the environmental justice. Where do you gentlemen kind of look at this as far as environmental justice and the city of Brockton, as far as your comprehension of, is it right for the city to go this direction, or is there another direction for the city to not go or go in?
I just love to jump in on that.
Please, Lucas.
Just because I've studied the issue extensively, and it's interesting. You brought up a really interesting point, because if you look at the coverage, people think that all the control resides in the city, and that the city will just be able to vote and say, no, we don't want it here. But it's still, you have to make your arguments on a legal basis. Right. So zoning has to find a legal reason not to allow it to be permitted. Planning board doesn't really have that opportunity, because they can only put conditions on a site review plan.
That's right.
Conservation Commission, the exact same thing. They can only put conditions on construction. When you talk about local control, you got to be very clear that in the end of the day, there are certain conditions that you can put on it, but you might not necessarily be able to stop it.
Right.
Well,
So
we can on the city council for the water.
well, that's the issue is, and that's why it becomes a question for city councilors, is where you stand on selling the water to the wastewater treatment, the water from the wastewater treatment plant to the facility. Here's the other kicker, though, is that there are laws that allow them to still use potable water, which is water that comes out of the community water system. So we could deny them on the city council the use of the wastewater, but we might not necessarily be legally allowed to deny them use of drinking water.
Right.
So when people say, local control, I'm going to stop it and stuff like that, you got to be very clear about where you can do that. But I do agree with you that it's in terms of like a legal analysis and what the city decided to do in terms of challenging the decision, the focus was really on the environmental justice piece. As an attorney and somebody who's reviewed siting board decisions, that's probably not where I would have gone with the appeal. I would have gone and challenge them based on their own standard, which is public convenience and necessity. The siting board specifically said, we're not granting you this exemption because there are so many other projects in queue, and we don't think the power is necessarily needed here right now. Not saying that it wouldn't be needed 4 or 5 years down the road. And for some reason, we didn't appeal it on that standard. We appealed on a completely other standard, which is more of a policy standard. And I thought we would have been more successful if we had really went to the SJC and said, hey, you know what, on this standard, your own standard, you're saying that this is not needed. But on the same time, you're granting an 8-0 decision in favor of it.
Mark, you make a great point on the legal case, absolutely. And that's why I think making a legal case, we should now begin to put more renewable energy ordinances on the books of the city of Brockton for all throughout the whole city from various things, so that when it's time to make a legal case, if we have to go that far, we'll have a precedent, a history of us wanting to go renewable energy. Because law is all about precedent and making a case, correct? I'm not a lawyer, but you don't have to be a lawyer to know the law. And I think that's what we should do too as a city councilor, start doing ordinances. For instance, the town of Gloucester did an ordinance of unnecessary business lighting at nighttime. They went around and said, oh, you don't need that light on. Turn that light off. Turn this light off. We can also do a compact fluorescent light bulb ordinance within city government. Go to city council chambers. Those light bulbs and those chandeliers are not compact fluorescent light bulbs. There'll be a startup cost for it, but we'll save money in the long run. And that's what it's about, the long run for Brockton, not just quick tax dollars over a few years, and then 20 years down the road we find out, oh, it was a bad idea. Because if you look at the history of Brockton back from the 1890s, there's been some great development, but there's been a really bad planning to foresight for the years ahead.
Right.
And that's what we've got to do in Brockton.
And there definitely isn't a master plan. And one of the things that came out,
Mr. Lucas.
sorry, again, I got to say my name, in the discussion that I had with individuals from Stop the Powers, Councilor Brophy actually had a change in the ordinance. You know, by right, the people from Brockton Clean Energy can build a power plant in an I3 zone, an industrial zone. They can do that by right. And my understanding is that Councilor Brophy and other members of the council changed that ordinance. But one of the things that you kind of leave as a caveat in terms of planning is that site, the local zoning exemption that they use, the statute that they use, they'll be able to use that in the future. So one of the things I kind of left as a caveat is you can change local ordinances, and you need to do that so that stuff goes before zoning as opposed to before planning board. But at the same time, if this project is stopped, don't be surprised with another project that tries to get zoning exemption in the future, because you have all the necessary parts to support a generator. You have a transmission line, you have space, you have water, and you also have gas.
Mr. Van Dam, Kevin, thank you
Mr.
very
Petty.
much. When I testified twice before the Energy Facility Siting Board in Boston, I was the only person of probably 15 or more who testified in favor for it, and twice they ruled unanimously 8-0. And so that made me feel very good. Either A, I'm very influential in speaking, or B, the board staff did their homework and they agreed with my comments and the staff's decisions and came up with an 8-0 decision. That speaks volumes when twice they have a unanimous decision. Pertaining to Oak Hill Way, as was mentioned earlier, the 3 components are in place. The pipeline, the water plant, the sewage plant, and the National Grid connection down the end of the road. Unlike Granite Ridge up in Londonderry, New Hampshire, where they had to dig a 5-mile trench to bury a pipe to carry in the wastewater, we don't have to do that here in Brockton, and so it's a good location for it.
Can I ask you one very quick question, which I've always wanted to ask you? Most of the councilor at larges are against it. You've got many of the state reps, state senators, very vocally against it, even trying to change some policies accordingly. You've got various policies that are inset into the state, even though they haven't necessarily been followed. There seem to be a lot of people who are of stature who disagree with you. How is that?
Well, as I stated earlier, I listened to those people who are qualified and certified to review such applications and to determine and to pass on their opinion to a staff. The staff passes their opinion on to the board, the EFSB in this case, and they put everything together and they make their decision, and that's why I put my faith in.
I think this is Robert Sullivan, and I think it's important to note that this has been a topic for many years now. I mean, I attended North Junior High, Davis School, West Junior High. I testified both times in Boston in opposition, and it just keeps going and going and going. You know what, though? That's the basis of development. This is the wrong development. If they want to put a wind turbine down there, I'll be the first cheerleader, because I know for a fact it doesn't have a health and safety aspect to it. So I think you need to look at, just to jump on what Mark was saying, that something is going to be built down there. We need it to. We need to move forward. We need to get more money, especially during tough economic times. It's just, in my view, and a vast majority of people, that's not the right project. We just need to have the right project here. And again, you need to keep working for the will of the people. And at the end of the day, it's not right. The people don't want it. Environmental justice, Mr. Tachi, from a legal standpoint, I am an attorney. I agree in some aspects with what my colleague, Mr. Lucas, said, but environmental justice has basic standing. The SJC cannot just throw this aside.
Right.
It has some validity. And, Jim DeAmbrose, who's the city solicitor, is a wonderful attorney. I mean, he really is. So I have a lot of faith in what the solicitor's office is doing, and also outside counsel for the city.
It honestly seems, though, that both sides, the proponents and opponents, both have different views as to what environmental justice, which I kind of find humorous, because the proponents see it as one thing and the opponents see it as another.
Kevin, Todd Petty, excuse me one second. If I can jump in. If I understand correctly, as you said, there are opponents and proponents.
Well, when this was going through the siting board, it was
environmental justice, from what I understand. If I'm wrong, I can be corrected. But from what I understand, environmental justice is putting out the information in multiple languages, having dialogue in multiple languages. And I believe that BCE met all those that criteria. I believe in terms of that part of environmental. Excuse me, gentlemen. In terms of putting it out, I believe in 5 or more languages, the information about the plant, that was done, and I think in Boston understood that, and they agreed with BCE on that term.
Todd is absolutely correct. I mean, environmental justice has a broader scope than that,
right.
Obviously,
right.
But specifically as it pertains to the siting board and the Executive Office of Environmental Affairs, environmental justice is a policy about, really for the most part, notification, to make sure this community outreach, if you have a community that speaks multiple languages, that they make sure that they understand the process that you're going through, so they're not left out of the process. Environmental justice is, like I said, it's a really broad term, but specifically as it pertains to the siting board and the process, it's specifically about that. And that's why I have a different point of view in terms of what you want to challenge the siting board in terms of the decision. That is more of a policy as opposed to a standard review. They clearly laid out their standard review, and they didn't follow it. And I think that's the basis where we challenge them and say, you know what, you didn't follow your own standard, as opposed to this is a policy that has been implemented by the Patrick administration. Actually, I think it was the Romney administration that started it, and then followed by the Patrick administration. So as opposed to attacking the policy, looking, again, from a legal standpoint, I would challenge the standard of review.
And if I can just jump on one more thing as well, just to give you a broader scope of the power that will be generated from Oak Hill Way. The solar bright fields down on Grove Street. It would take 700 identical fields on Grove Street with ideal conditions in terms of sunlight to equal the energy produced in one day down on Oak Hill Way. So if we get the space for 700 bright fields in Brockton, well, let's build them. And we can guarantee that the sun is going to be out all the time, we'll do it. Now, I do agree with the 3 gentlemen. There is a place for green energy. However, that's not the primary source of energy. If it were, we'd all have National Grid disconnecting our homes from the power source. We'd sever our sewer ties and put in a septic system in our house. But that's not realistic.
I don't think that's the reason.
You pointed out that you need 700 solar fields to build as much energy as this power plant. So is it about the tax revenue or creating energy? If you're going to compare building a fossil fuel power plant and needing how many solar fields we need, you're totally lost on the idea of what energy creation is going to be like in the future, okay? There's many startup industries right now creating creating paint that can grab solar energy. There's a company in Boston called Solar Ivy, where it's ivy. It looks like it's real green ivy growing. It's solar panels you plug into your wall. The energy grid's changing. No, we're not going to go just turn things off. It's a process. But in order to get to where we need to go for the future, for my kids someday, your grandkids someday, Bob Sullivan's grandkids someday, we've got to start investing now in the next technology, not still selling rotary phones to people.
Well, I'm not talking about the rotary phones track, but what I will say is
about
that,
fossil
again,
fuels.
what I will say is natural gas. Everyone in this room uses it, whether you have a grill at home or whether you have it in your house. Everyone uses it, and that's the primary source of fuel for the plant. And I'll leave it at that.
You're absolutely right about that, Todd. It is, but just because we've got one devil on one hand doesn't mean you've got to put the devil on the left hand too. We once painted with lead paint. Do you guys mind if I have a cigarette right now?
Right. How about
It's okay to smoke, right? Still.
Well, we used to in here.
Or the doctors used to say
We've
4
still
to
got
5 want
asbestos in the
cool.
walls.
Right. So it's like we now know with education and time that these things really aren't good. So if we have the technology, which we do today, to create energy, and that's what it's about, not tax revenue, because we can get tax revenue in other ways in the city of Brockton.
If I could, this
Sullivan.
is, there's a misunderstanding by some people in Brockton that if this thing comes here, that their energy costs are going to go down. This energy is not going to Brockton; it's going to the grid. So it doesn't make any sense to say, okay, let's put a gas-fired diesel backup. There's no parameters set by the state on that they have to mandate if this does go there, and God help us if it does. They can switch at any time, whatever's cheaper. If diesel's cheaper, from a business standpoint, we all know what they're going to switch to. Where are those trucks going down? They're going down Main Street? They're going down Plain Street? Where are they going? I filed a resolve. I had Chief Galligan from the fire department come before the City Council Finance Committee. Asked him just that. Manny Gomes, the former traffic commissioner, I asked him that. We're not just talking about some isolated area. We're talking about a major throughway in the City of Champions. And it doesn't just impact the south side where Councilor Staninsky represents. It's north, south, east, west in the core, and all the surrounding areas. Matt Albanese, West Bridgewater Selectman, he's a big cheerleader working with us to fight this thing. So I do think it's short-sighted to look at the dollars because you're really putting a price tag at number one. Number two, I concur 100% with Pat Quinn. It doesn't make any sense to say that this is the cure-all for energy because it's not. If you really peel back the layers and you do your homework and you do diligence, I know you have, Ron, I know you have, Mr. Tachi, it just doesn't make any sense. They could leave at any time. They're a foreign company. Siemens is from Germany. And then what do we have? We have an abysmal, attractive nuisance down on the south side of the city of Brockton.
If I could jump in here 1 second, Mark. Excuse me 1 second. Regarding the comments that Bob just made. You have to understand one thing. Up to this very moment, this project has passed every board it has been in front of, including the people in the city of Brockton that are appointed to boards by the mayor that I confirm their appointments to those boards. The Planning Board, the Conservation Commission. This project has passed those boards.
Specifically
It has also passed
standards.
the city's Site Plan Review Board. It has satisfied all requests and requirements made by the fire department. All safety stops are put in place. So what we're saying right here isn't going to change anything.
We don't
at
have
this
a
second.
pollution board.
But it has passed. Yes, well, we have those who, as I mentioned earlier, we have those who are certified and qualified to make decisions on points that many of us in the city of Brockton aren't educated on.
You're right, Todd, but all those boards are saying is that if this plant gets built, it's being built to proper standards. That's all it is. It's not saying it's good to build. They're just saying it will be built to the proper standards of power plants. But still, I don't want to build a house in a wetland, but I could still build a house that would stand on a wetland. But it's whether or not people want to build the home or the power plant where they want to. But honestly, this is not the only issue in Brockton, and we should not be short-sighted,
absolutely.
okay?
But let's-
The power plant's
let's-
huge, and I'll give it over to you, Mark, but there's many other issues,
We'll
and
move on
let's
after
start
this.
talking
We'll move
about
on
them.
after this.
No, I just wanted to add it's something because I know we were talking about renewable energy and what impact it's going to have here in the Commonwealth. And Todd's right. I mean, in the mix, there'll always be to some extent existing gas-fired power plants. But in terms of what you can bring here, in terms of providing energy to the Commonwealth, there's hydroelectric. I mean, obviously Brockton's not suited for hydroelectric. It's not suited for wind necessarily, but it is suited for solar. But there are other communities that are pushing these projects with hydroelectric line being built from Canada coming into Boston. You have some wind farms that are being pushed here in Massachusetts. So I think the siting board was correct in assessing the fact that you're going to have a lot of energy, and that then this may be one additional source, but we're not looking at an energy shortfall, and we're actually seeing a demand.
And let's not, before you segue out of this segment, and let's not forget the governor had said earlier this year he's looking to get 2,000 megawatts of renewable energy,
Right.
And I think in that plan, I don't think I heard anything about fossil fuel. I think it was wind and solar and anything else that is green technology.
I took a day off of work about a month ago. I went into the State House and I met one-on-one with Lieutenant Governor Tim Murray, and I expressed to him my concern about this. Now, he's from Worcester. He's a former counselor at large, so he can appreciate Brockton. He comes to Brockton quite a bit. And exactly what you just said, Kevin, it was echoed to me, that no time was that ever brought up in that proposition. So, my view is, and it has been articulated here, and we can move on, but I think at the end of the day, what impact would that have on our property value as well? Because it's easy when I'm knocking on doors, and I've knocked on 8,000 doors since April, are people saying to me, well, Bob, if that comes, I'm moving out of Brockton. And you know what? Reality says, who's going to move to Brockton? Who's going to buy a house if that's there? What realtor is going to say, hey, you know what? There's a beautiful house on 11th Ave. Oh, there's a power plant back there. So I think you can have a bunch of variables, and I think it's been articulated tonight on both sides. But in my view, again, it's not right for Brockton.
And
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead. No, come on.
No, I was going to say, and there are opportunities, and it's Mark Lucas again, there are opportunities for us to actually access some of the public property to actually use for renewable energy. There's an RFP that just went out from the Mass Technology Collaborative that specifically is using public buildings as part of the Green Communities Act to place solar panels, and Easton's one of the towns that's taking advantage of that. So there's some opportunities for us that we can still get involved in the renewable energy.
I think I just want to, one more point regarding our real estate values. A colleague of mine is in the real estate business down in the Plymouth Cape Cod area. And never once, when people have moved into Plymouth, which is growing at a dramatic rate, they're building a movie studio down there. Pine Hills is located in Plymouth. Never once, when my colleague was selling real estate in Plymouth, did anyone even mention the fact regarding Pilgrim nuclear
Right.
power plant.
Okay.
And so I'm just
Right.
using that as an example of real estate values.
Yeah, okay. Well, we're a little larger than that area, though. We're going to, that was a power plant show. We owe our sponsors some time. Listen to these fine sponsors, and please buy their product for me. Okay, we're back. Good luck to you all. We have no more time. So, that's a shame. Can you all stay for another hour?
Absolutely.
Good. Apparently, we do have more to talk about, and we will do so. Mike, we don't have enough time to get into anything here, do we? 3 minutes. Do we owe any more spots to anybody? All right, fine. Then I'll ask you all, how do you feel about the economy? No. There's so many subjects we can get into. What can you do in 2 minutes, Kevin?
Well, the Dow hit 10,000 yesterday for the first time
Yeah.
in many, many months, so that's a good indication on how the economy might be going. And
Perhaps.
if I can segue into that, I'd just like to tell you about my plan for the city of Brockton. I got my ABCs plan.
Well, we only got a minute for
Well,
it.
this will probably take about a minute, 1 second, starting right now. And but
All right.
my ABC's plan for the city of Brockton, when it's implemented, it will market our attractive and affordable housing. It will showcase our bright and beautiful new schools, and it will keep our streets clean and safe. And our residential tax rate is $11.10 per $1,000 of assessed value of your home. Commercial tax rate is slightly under $23. It's $22.84 per $1,000 assessed value of your commercial property. Add with that sewerage, water, $70 quarterly trash fee. Those are perfect ingredients to attract people to the city of Brockton. Those ingredients are going to bring people to buy a home. They're going to go to our schools,
And
that's
now
gonna,
let's talk about the things that need improvement.
those things right there are items that other communities can't offer. If they do, it comes at an incredible price.
All right, thank you, Mr. Petty, and we're going to hear from Mr. Lucas, Mr. Sullivan, Mr. Quinn about their plans as well. Right after we come back. Don't go anywhere. It's very important. You need to listen. You listen to 1460 AM WXBR and watching us on BCA as well. We'll be right back after this. We never stopped. We just kept going.
It's kept vamping.
Yeah, it's too bad you had to listen to the news with Kevin Tachi.
I'm sorry.
Speaking of the news with Kevin Tachi, a little bit breaking news as far as the 21st Century Corporation is concerned. Apparently, its leader is gone. They say because of resignation.
That's correct.
Who knows? Does this? Yeah. Well, you asked the question because you're involved.
Well, that's what the organization's saying, that he resigned, but there have been other things that have said that it was actually, we're all set, thank you, bye. Gentlemen, I want to kind of ask you I think the biggest topic as far as this election, whether it's mayoral, council at large, ward council, is planning, city planning. And I know it's been something that we've been hearing city councilors talk about whenever they meet, whether it's FinCom or regular council meetings, is planning. And some councilors aren't pleased with having a separate entity like a 21st Century Corporation. Now we just see about a week and a half ago, there was something about the Inspector General and HUD and about an audit about grant monies that the federal government are about to bestow upon the city and what's being done. Your thoughts as far as planning here in the city, and do you feel that we can still keep going on with this economic arm called the 21st Century Corp, or is there people differing here in opinions? Should there be a city planner?
Mr. Sullivan.
If you've followed my track record, in 2008 during the budget hearings, I was adamant that you cannot privatize planning. You need to have a planning component at City Hall. You need to. And I stood up, and Todd supported me on this, and it was unanimous. I was going to cut $250,000 from the mayor's side of his budget relative to the 21st century. It was really a stance that I wanted to make because, in my view, how can you go forward economically and from a planning standpoint without having it under the dome at City Hall? You can't. So I met with Mayor Harrington, and we reached a compromise, and I think that's the art of policymaking. I cut $100,000, but he kept a planning component. Andy Jasmine, who was the former junior planner. Now, this year, as you recall, I made another $100,000 cut because Mr. Jasmine left, and there is no planning component left, and it was unfunded. So there's no planning component. Now, I served on the 21st Century last year by virtue of being the city council president. Those people on the 21st Century are good people. Some of them live here, work here. They're volunteers. They don't get paid a dime. They're business people.
Yep.
The original intent of the 21st Century was to do economic development in the city of Brockton. It was a great idea. Now, I brought Mr. Walsh before the city council 3 specific times during his tenure. He's been here 10 months. He's now gone. My view was not a personal attack against Don Walsh. It was there's no accountability. There's too many layers removed from the city council. We're a strong council, weak mayor, form of government, Form B government. It just didn't make any sense. Now, I applaud anybody that can bring businesses to the city of Champion. Mary Waldron's a cheerleader, and it's a good thing. Vinnie Moderano from the Y, Dave Curtis. I mean, these people are good people trying to do good things in the city of Brockton. My view is it doesn't make any sense to privatize it and bring it so many layers removed. I've said that. I'm going to continue to say that. Now, the fact that Mr. Walsh did retire yesterday, my view, and if you read the Enterprise recently, was it was inexcusable and unconscionable for him last Monday night to come before the full Finance Committee and not disclose to the elected officials that sit there, all 11 city councils, not to disclose the audit from HUD. There's no rhyme or reason that he did not do that. So shame on him. And now we need to move forward collectively as a body and as a city to move forward. And I really think we need to, whoever wins the mayor's race, we need to revisit the idea of a planner at City Hall. It doesn't make any sense not to.
We absolutely,
Mr. Lucas.
yeah, we absolutely need a planner at City Hall, and we also need a master plan. The fact that we don't have one in a city this size is ridiculous. There's not a city in the Commonwealth that you can go to that does not have a master plan or a planner. And Brockton needs that. We need a vision of where we're going to be 5, 10, 15 years down the road. And then we kind of do it backwards here in this city. We kind of let a business come in, and then we try to figure out, is there going to be truck traffic? There's going to be noise? If there's going to be infrastructure necessary to support that, as opposed to saying, here's what we want to do in the west side, north side, east side. Here's what we want to do in Montello and Campello, and we get the neighborhoods' input, and we figure out what the industry is going to be, and then we support that industry. You know, I had the good fortune of having an internship down in Baltimore when I was in college. And this is before Baltimore was Baltimore now. And I worked with the chief of staff and director of communications back then. And they took me around to the different neighborhoods. They took me around to this ball field that they had. And they took me around to their waterfront. And they said, look, you know, come back in 10 years. You won't believe what this place looks like. A couple of years later, they opened up Camden Yards, and then they completely redid their waterfront because they laid out a plan. They said 5 years, 10 years, 15 years down the road, this is what our city is going to look like. And they took the time to not only lay out their plan, but they also implemented it. So that's what we need here in the city.
Mark, you just said, though, previously that you can't decide what comes in. If a business wants to come in, they have a perfect right to make the accolades and pass all the boards. So, which is it? How do you plan to bring somebody in if you have no control about who comes in and applies?
This is a perfect example. We have an industrial corridor here in Brockton, but we don't really have a plan for what businesses fit in that industrial corridor. Lexington, Massachusetts, for example, they have an industrial corridor that's right off their air base, and they're specifically targeted for life science and biotech. They have the workforce for that. They actually laid out the infrastructure for that. So they identified what their core industry was going to be, and then they put out their infrastructure, and they also laid out their plan based on
But
that.
if somebody comes in and wants to be on that property, they have a perfect right to apply, and the city can't stop, the town can't stop them.
Yeah, they can if you
They have
have
an ordinance in place.
if you have an ordinance in place. The one example that you cannot do that, where there is local exemptions, right, is for the power plant, if we're energy generating facilities. So that is the one case where you don't have local control. But other instances, you do have local control to be able to say, in this area, this is where I want to do with this particular corridor. Some towns, they specifically just have a greenway corridor where they have a bike trail and they just have open space. Some towns do,
Pedestrian only areas.
pedestrian only areas.
Yeah.
Kenmore Square, perfect example. It's a college generated
Times Square near
economy.
is all pedestrian only.
But power
Exactly.
plant, no, that makes a lot of sense. True, but
Planning, you said, Patrick Quinn again, but I agree with Bob and Mark about city planning. City planning should be from within City Hall. If you look at any city the size of ours in the Commonwealth and other states, every one of them has a city planner, okay? And it's very important for everyone out there who's listening and watching to understand what a city planner is. The eyes and the ears of a community, okay? A city planner will go out to neighborhoods and see what's going on with playgrounds and workflow, car flow, traffic flow, everything, housing, construction, and they can report that back and say, hey, this is what we've got to do over here and over there. We've never had that, really, and that's what we need. That's a very important part about any urban areas, a city planner. The other thing, too, about this 21st Century Corporation, the BBB, that report's scathing, okay? Absolutely scathing. There's 3 major points the federal government found out, is that with the amount of money we're getting, around $7.2 million, give me some change back and forth, there's no one they had in there that had the experience and the knowledge of how to manage that kind of federal money. People have got to understand with this, with the NSP money coming from the federal government, the Obama administration wants every T crossed and every I dotted. They want accountability. which in Brockton is another big issue. We've lacked that for many years. There are people here in Brockton who are amazing workers in City Hall and private and public sector that are accountable. But the general attitude is unaccountability. The second thing is that they found too much conflicts of interest, or the appearance of conflict of interest. Individuals who, with all good intention to economic development, were on the boards of 2 different organizations, and one of them was giving money and one was taking money. They should have known to, resign one of the boards. The third thing is that most of the records weren't even around, and the money hadn't even been given out properly. Most of the CDBG money, CDBG money, for this year hasn't even been dispersed yet, and it's October. That's lacking development for us. So those are the major points there about that whole thing of city planning. It has to come back to City Hall, absolutely.
Mr. Petty.
Thank you very much, Ron. I'll just make one point. I've been on the city council when this change took place. I do agree we do need a 21st century corporation. I don't believe there's any councilor who can be out every day, going to every event, networking here, networking there, to bring in businesses. That's why you have your networking tools in place, so you can bring in a Keneally meet, so you can bring in other businesses from other cities, or you can retain businesses here in Brockton. But what I will say is I'm looking forward to Monday night, Bob, when the new chairman of the board of the 21st Century Corporation, Vinnie Materano, comes to City Council chambers with Jay Condon, and we're going to have an explanation, and I think Vinnie is going to promise us a nice fresh start with this, and we'll move forward from this point.
Let me ask you, 2 councilors exist here, strong council. 21st Century Corporation is created. The council didn't know at that time what the ground rules were for their reporting, what they were going to do, the complexities of what they were doing. Were you aware of that, or do you find now at this point that, well, why did I let them in there? They weren't what they said they were going to be, or what happened there?
Well, first of all, Ron, the 21st Century was created before I became an elected official here in the city of Brockton. And when Mayor Harrington, as CEO of the city of Brockton, decided to do this, and I appreciate what he's trying to do, think outside the box, cost containment, fiscal responsibility, it really opened up a void, in my view, a disconnect between the city council, Todd Petty and myself, and the other 11 of us, to work with those folks, because they had no really requirement to come before the city council. They don't work for us. So at the end of the day, just to take a step back, the planning component, I worked with the former planner, Nancy Stack-Savoy, to bring 40R to Brockton. We had a planner. If we didn't have a planner, I don't think 40R would have come here. Expedited permitting, 43D. These are catalysts for investment in downtown. There's 5 zones, and I served on the planning board for 2 years. So I think at the end of the day, the 21st century, the natural intent of it is a good thing, and we need to move forward on that. Monday night, I applaud. That's going to be good. But for Mr. Walsh, and now that's in the past, we move forward. But I think we learned from those mistakes. Richard Sergi and the Housing Authority, you know what? They're a gem in the city of Brockton. We need to really use the experience and the accountability and above-board practices learned at the Housing Authority to move forward.
Right.
I think the Housing Authority just won a national award as
That's
well
right,
for its revitalizing a neighborhood.
That's right.
Good cheers to Mr. Sergi.
And also the banks were chastised for giving too much money out.
Yeah, at the same time.
Let me ask you gentlemen a question. What do you feel is the city's biggest asset? If I was to kind of look at a couple of different things outside of the box, we have 2 hospitals that are here. And we're talking about healthcare is probably one of the growing industries as far as needing people. We have a community college that's here that is actually, I think, being bonded $27 million to build a building to train technicians in the medical field. Is this something where we try to capitalize on? And is this when Mr. Lucas talking about having a plan that we kind of plan forward to kind of maybe draw businesses and draw residents to come here and say, hey, look, we have a field that's growing right now. Is this something that you yourselves, as elected or soon to be hopefully elected, think that this is something to build on?
Yeah, for full disclosure, I actually recently was elected to the Board of Trustees for Caritas Good Samaritan, and my wife Maria is a physician assistant in the ER at Brockton. So healthcare is very important. My mom's a registered nurse, formerly of Dr. Alan Blotsky. So healthcare makes sense. We have Shields MRI, a premier MRI in New England that started here, the Shields family. Now, right over the border in Easton, Stonehill College just built this wonderful science building. I think you need to really capitalize on the experience transparency here. The Brockton collaboration with Massasoit and Bridgewater, the gentleman came before the council last year to talk about health science, health education,
Right.
medical fields, medical techs. It makes sense to do that. And I mentioned that last night during our debate. We need to capitalize on the core of downtown. Let's bring an annex. Let's bring a college collaboration here. Talk is cheap. It's been brought up just like two-way traffic. Enough's enough. Proof is in the pudding. Either do it or stop talking about it. But I think what you just said, Mr. Tochi, is that, we have the building blocks here in the city of Brockton, be it education, great education, or healthcare. There's certain industries that we need to maintain here. When we lost the Sorelli Foods, I mean, that was devastating. The unfortunate thing in tough economic times is that if you don't have the right leadership in place, you're really going to fail. And that's what Pat Quinn has been saying, accountability, transparency, and I concur with that. But I think at the end of the day, you need to capitalize on Brockton people, Brockton businesses, and really move forward in the future.
I think Bob is right on that, absolutely, and I think you're right. I think any industry we should attract that's an asset to the city of Brockton. And I got to commend Bob for bringing the business leaders in front of the city council to talk about what we need. And that's really the question: is how do we start the catalyst of attracting these businesses and also using the businesses that are already here? And what do they talk about? Code enforcement, blight, it's safety and danger, and the way the city looks. And that's why on the city council, you've got to have someone who can take those ideas and now catalyst those and start making policy. All right? That's what didn't happen on city council. There's no policy for changing code enforcement happen. And we need someone on city council who will take that and go further with it. And I commend Bob for bringing those business leaders. And they said it all right there. Plain and simple. Blight. Code enforcement. It's not just enough that we're not doing privately, but we've got to do it publicly as well. And I saw it happen in Boston, I saw it happen in New York, and it's happened in many other communities in Massachusetts, Lawrence especially. And that's where we start. If we don't start there, that's how we start crawling. Then we get on our feet, then we start walking. You'll see more businesses come downtown. You'll see biotech. You'll see the health industry, filmmaking possibly, renewable energy. That's how you start, is you get rid of you enforce the code. That's what you have to do. It's fundamentally.
And the question was really, I know, was focused a little bit more about healthcare and that, and it's something that we do have to start examining here. I did talk to somebody about at Tufts University, at Tufts Healthcare, Tufts Hospital, that was looking to come down, New England Tufts Medical Center, that was looking to come down to the South Shore, and I pitched them on the idea of coming to Brockton, but because of the fact that you have Brockton Hospital and Good Samaritan, from a hospital standpoint, the market was a little bit saturated, but they did identify the fact that it was a great place for medical manufacturing and device manufacturing because you're close to Boston. There's a huge medical community. We have the workforce for medical manufacturing, and there are some generally in the South Shore. So we have to really kind of look at what's the best fit for Brockton. But I also agree with Bob. It's one of the things I talked about in the Brockton Plan, which is available at thebrocktonplan.com, is building a college collaborative, because you need to have mass and population downtown. Unfortunately, and it was something that was brought up in one of the debates last night, is that people who are living here in Brockton are afraid to go downtown. So we need to get people in downtown, and we need to get young people in downtown, people who are willing to spend a little bit of money, who don't have a fear of coming downtown. We need to bring one of those satellite campuses from the area colleges to the downtown. Massasoit got $27.4 million for an allied health building.
Correct.
That needed to be downtown. Bridgewater State got money for a life sciences building. I forget the exact.
It's a 5-year capital plan.
A 5-year capital plan.
That was just approved last week.
Yeah, we need to bring those those buildings downtown, so we have a mass downtown.
Ms. Petty.
Speaking about the health field in Brockton, Massasoit, we're talking about the building that they're going to be able to put up. Stonehill College has put up an incredible building over there. They're able to do that because of the sewer system in the city of Brockton. But many people don't realize this, but Stonehill College, the community of Stonehill College, is tied into the city of Brockton's sewer system. And that's one thing that I've looked at all these years. Stonehill College, it's probably the gem of the region, but Stonehill College continues to expand like a Lego community, and they can just build and build, and they don't have to come in front of the city. They don't have to pay any extra sewer tie-in or anything like that. And I reviewed their contract that they have with the city of Brockton, and I believe, in terms of generating revenue for our city, to have us run better and to have our sewer system run better, our water department run better, police and fire, I believe that the contract with Stonehill College should be reviewed, should be restructured. They're paying on 27 different buildings. Some use a little sewage, some use more sewage, instead of paying a single number at the end of the pipe. And so in my opinion, we're missing out on hundreds of thousands of dollars a year from Stonehill College, and I believe that's something we should visit, and the contract should.
How long has that been going on for?
It's been going on for quite some time, ever
Quite
since
some
Stonehill
time.
Collins. Yeah, it's nothing. It's a
Status quo in
contract.
Brockton.
Excuse me, Patrick. It's not a problem. It's the way the contract was written. But I believe it should be restructured and it should be reviewed and looked at.
And when you talk about assets, Todd's right. I mean, when you talk
Lucas.
about business development, you have water, you have sewage, you have low rents, you have some of the infrastructure in place. So if you're talking about what makes Brockton attractive, those are some of the things that a large city offers.
The number one asset in Brockton
Sullivan.
is the Brocktonians, the people. You know, it's been a community of immigrants. My own grandmother came over here from Ireland. Now we have just a different wave of immigrants here, and that's great. That's a healthy community. And you know, I think at the end of the day, if you don't have the right people in place, the community is going to fail. We're not failing. We just need to go in a different direction and really address what's the most important thing. Public safety is the most important thing in any community. Without public safety, first of all, no one's going to stay here. So we need to address public safety. And how do you do that? And you talked about it earlier. $8 million was just brought forward by Governor Patrick, unfortunately, for fire. Unfortunately,
136 jobs saved.
that's right, but that was for New Bedford and Fall River. I spoke to Archie Gormley, president of the union here in Brockton, just last week about that. Brockton may, and the word may, come into effect on the second round.
There's another 12 million that's
right.
still yet to be allotted from
But may I
stimulus
say, is it
money.
necessarily that you throw money at a problem necessarily? Isn't it more ideas and community leaders and those of, if you have immigration, then those what's the proper politically correct term? Shouldn't those communities be involved in their own communities' crime, their own people's crime, if that's the case? Isn't that really the way to do
They
it?
shouldn't. I think you have to lead by example. Bob's right about safety, absolutely. But we have to ask the question, why do we have so much crime in the city of Brockton? Is it Brocktonians that grew up here that are now criminals, or are we attracting people that are criminals to Brockton, or is it a combination of both? And yes, so if we lead by example and start cleaning up our city by code enforcement, possibly some of these other ethnic groups will take a stance and say, hey, yeah, Brockton's doing it, we're going to do it because we're part of Brockton. Absolutely. It's the broken windows theory.
I think
you
there's
know?
more to it, though.
I
think
know it's more
just
to it.
crime, but-
I know it's
But we're
more
not-
to
we're
it.
not
It's a big
addressing the
web,
other
but you know
part
what? You got to start. You got to do more than one thing at the same time.
And I don't think it's the ethnic communities that are,
No,
you
not
know,
at all.
that are.
No, I'm not saying solely, but I say, but they should take responsibility. All communities should take responsibility for their communities. It shouldn't be a throw money at. Yes, you need more police officers, but that's not the end of. That's not the answer. We've had that before.
But let me
And
make it
and
clear. When I
was-
say
and it was
ethnic,
a-
when
it
I
was
say
a
ethnic,
Scotch
I
tape
mean
kind of
Irish,
deal.
I mean Polish,
Right.
I mean Greek, I
Yeah.
mean Haitian, I mean Angolan, I mean them all. We're all ethnic, whether you're white
Right.
or black
Yes.
or Asian or whatever you are.
Right.
We're all ethnic. Make that clear in Brockton, because I still bump into people who think, oh, well, I'm white, I'm not ethnic. You are ethnic, okay? Everybody's ethnic. Pizza's ethnic. Italian food's ethnic. All right, Brockton's a multi-ethnical community, and it's time we start bringing that into an American gentrification where we can do it all together at once. It's the attitude.
I don't think adding police officers is just the only solution, but I definitely see that it's made a difference. When you had the state police patrols here in Brockton, it made a difference. And I
Came
talk.
back.
Yeah, but you know what happened though is that you had people who were being stopped for traffic violations. They found out that they had warrants. They were brought into the district court or superior court, and then they were either placed back on probation or back into the system. And that's the thing, is that unless you have that enforcement out there, you're not going to be able to catch these individuals, and they're going to be able to go back out and commit more crimes.
But Chief Conlon, and this is Robert Sullivan again, Chief Conlon has really been thinking outside the box and followed the Bill Bratton theory. And Brockton is going to move forward in a positive light because of the CompStat system. It's broken up into 3 sectors, and it's a great thing. And Todd and myself on the City Council, we've appropriated certain funds. Mike Sullivan, the former U.S. Attorney, gave a grant to the City of Brockton where there's a bullet detection rate. It's really almost like a LoJack
Like sonar.
yeah, and you know, these are things, you know, and just to get back to what Mr. Quinn said, you know, there's always going to be crime, right? I mean, that's human nature. That's human nature, and based upon the population and the density of Brockton, there's going to be crime. We need to deal with crime in a proactive way, and I think that the police department is working diligently. The feds are here, DEA, FBI, the staties, but at the end of the day, the shortage on their end, manpower, is lacking as well. So I think, you know, to have the right leadership in place going forward only makes sense for Brockton. Whoever wins is doing it because they think they can make a difference, and I think you need to re-elect people that have experience and elect, we know at least one new person is going to be joining us on the council, maybe more, depending on what the vote is. But at the end of the day, and you and I spoke about this, Ron, and the other colleagues here, if 12% only voted in September, you know, that doesn't speak volumes for the mass. We need to get people to vote November 3rd for the present, but more importantly, the future of the city of Brockton.
Todd Petty again. If I can add one thing on to the crime fighting portion of this discussion, is we have a license plate enhancement tool now on several police cars, and what this has allowed the police department to do is probably pull over more cars in a week than they were able to do in 2 months. Hundreds of cars have been stopped and towed away because A, stolen vehicle, or B, a switched license plate, or any number of things that occurred where the person had a warrant out for their arrest or something like that. But all these tools that are coming are allowing the police to just do hundreds of more car towings and arrests that otherwise they wouldn't be able to do.
What's being done as far as education, and I think I might have asked this last night, education regarding drugs, especially in our school system. We see the Enterprise do it. They've done a great series on wasted youth, but we still see issues with drugs, young people getting involved with drugs. It's the silent. There's the silent problem in homes where a lot of times parents don't know. What do you think? What has been done? Whether it's someone who's currently on the council, or maybe it's somebody who's running for these seats, as far as is there enough being done to educate the parents, the children about drugs, and also about being what crowds to get involved with and not get involved with, as we do have a gang element that is here in the city.
Absolutely. And I think that to some extent the school department is doing its fair share in terms of at least trying to educate the parents and the kids about drugs. I don't think we make it a community-wide discussion,
right.
And I definitely don't think we translate that message into different messages or have that discussion in different communities. And I think it has to go not only from the schools to the parents, but also to everything that's kind of involved in the community. Sports groups, teams, extracurricular activities, churches, everyone kind of needs to embrace the issue. And unfortunately, it's very tough to get people to start talking about it. It's almost like domestic violence. One of the things that I worked on in the Community Foundation of Greater Plymouth County is trying to get a community organizer to work specifically about domestic violence and start just the conversations about domestic violence. We need to do the same thing about drug use. We need to really try to get some funding, and there's grant funding out there and foundation funding out there, to get somebody just to do a community organization effort on just talking about drug violence and drug use and how it gets into the household, because it's just a tough personal issue that people don't really want to discuss, but it's out there and everybody's experiencing, and people are seeing the overdoses.
Everybody.
Absolutely.
Yeah, when I went to Brockton High, I graduated in 1988. I was president of Students Against Driving Drunk. And when I was elected in 2005 and sworn in 2006, I addressed two different specific things here in Brockton: underage drinking, and also under the drug paraphernalia law, under Mass General Law, rolling papers that are sold at different institutions here in Brockton. It's legal to sell, but people don't buy those to roll cigarettes. They roll them to
unless they're 70.
Well, yeah, exactly. So we actually had a resolve, and I had Chief Conlon come before us. There's other communities that have prohibited the sale of that, okay? And there's been some litigation and the like. But I think at the end of the day, you need to look at who's doing what in the community, okay? I think Matt Malone, the new superintendent, I met with him last Friday. He's going to be a cheerleader for the children here in Brockton. We also have to think what's being done right now locally. Weeds and Seed program. District Attorney Cruz, he's a good district attorney. He's doing good things. But at the end of the day, it really starts at home. When I grew up, and when all of us grew up, very, very rarely was it a broken home. There was a lot of mums and dads. Times have changed now. And also, you're seeing that the lack of supervision at times, and people are just trying to get by. You have to work. So there's not always a mom or dad at home. But I think that really has had an impact. And what you said, Mr. Touch, is correct. There are certain elements. Do you want to call them gangs or groups of people, whatever you want to define them as? There are people out there that are doing illegal activities here in the city of Brockton. The police are trying to combat that. But what's really the borderline basis of their criminal activity? Drugs.
Right.
And it could be anything. It could be marijuana, cocaine, obituates, heroin, whatever it is, it's drugs. And again, we talked about crime always existing. Drug will always exist. Be it someone smoking a joint in 1970 and listen to the Beatles to nowadays. To nowadays. So I think we need to work collectively. I think elected officials have a duty to do that. I think all Brocktonians, no matter what ethnic background you come from. We're all Brockton people. We need to work to better the community.
If I could kind of follow up on that, do you think that are we educating enough of the multiple cultures that are here in the city? Are we reaching all those cultures, or are we just hitting a fraction of
I don't
the
know if you have
populace?
to go specifically
Quinn.
drug education culturally. I think you should just do it as a Brockton, as a whole city.
I understand
That's
that,
what
but
it
I'm
is.
saying though is that you can't just put it out there and
It's a great idea. Sure, we should do that too. Absolutely. How would you do that? Different flyers in different languages, different cultural events. Sure. The main thing, what Bob talks about, is that drugs are everywhere. All right, whether they be illegal or legal. I mean, think about all the 60-year-old people who got to go get my medication now. It's a whole culture of drugs, and we have to give our youth an opportunity for an alternative. If there's no alternatives, they're going to chances are they'll sit around, drink, and do drugs. I saw it in my own neighborhood where I live on the north side when I bought my house next to my mom and dad. The neighborhood was infested with a drug dealer who was selling to kids, high school kids, college-age kids. They were doing nothing, coming and going, throwing their McDonald's out the window, right? And how do you combat that? You got to do it neighborhood-wise too, as much as police enforcement. What did I do? I went out there and I stopped the cars. And I said, hey, I know you just bought your drugs from so-and-so, but do you mind not throwing your McDonald's out the window? It's kind of weird that I'm accepting that they're buying drugs in my neighborhood. But what did I do? I started the process of these people who are doing something illegal are now respecting my neighborhood a little bit. All right? Then it was, don't just drive in and drive out. Park in the driveway, get out, go in the house, then come back out, then leave. All right? And they still do it to this day. But you know what happens now? The neighborhood's back. People are walking their dogs. Kids are playing in the neighborhoods. Now cars we don't know, it's pretty much lessened now because now everyone knows, oh, we don't know this car. It's probably a drug dealer, okay? So there's many different ways, not just the one and
That's
two
called
ways.
smart drug dealing.
There's smart drug dealing, I guess, yeah. And it's not good, but you know what? I helped rebuild
than
that
stupid
neighborhood,
drug
no
dealing,
question
yeah.
about that. So there's many things, but the big thing is youth. And the big thing that from my experience, is I can remember being in the 7th grade at North Junior High School, and they brought in a guy who was in jail for drugs. Right, and he talked for an hour, and you know what? Kids were kind of listening, but they really weren't listening. You know why? Because kids want to listen to mentors, people that they look up to. So we got to start a program in schools, maybe the 5th, 6th, and 7th grade, where we have professionals go in and talk about what they did in their lives that were good, that kids can aspire to. I did that when I was in New York City and Connecticut in schools, and kids were amazed.
What about something like a Scared Straight program? Does anybody remember that from back in the day?
Absolutely.
What about something like that, where you bring them into?
There's all kinds of programs that not one program is going to solve it, but many programs at the same time will have an effect on the city of Brockton.
Mr. Petty.
Yeah, thank you. Todd Petty again. One thing that I firmly believe in, I believe that kids want structure. I believe that kids want to be told to what to do. I believe if you see them throwing a piece of trash on the street, say, hey, will you pick that up, please? They pick it up, they throw it away. One thing that I'm a believer in, and my sister is a school administrator out in California, out in Bakersfield, California, and she instituted a school dress code policy with uniforms, khaki pants, polo shirts alike, and it's a real hard area in California. And she implemented this policy throughout a region of 10 schools, and it has cut down on problems well over 50%. And I believe, and I spoke with Matt Malone, as you did, Bob, last week, and I mentioned to Bob, I believe if there's an option out there, if there's a uniform, a pant and a shirt that a parent can buy for their students, for their children, I believe more people will buy it than you think. Khakis, a polo shirt, and shoes, and for $200 a year, you can dress your child for school, and I believe that could be a turning point in attitude. There are two things that a child can control: it's their attitude and their effort. And I believe if they're made to feel good, look good, they'll act just as good. And one other thing I want to add in, and I could be saying this against my better judgment, but I want to see basketball leagues in the city of Brockton, whether it be youth league or whether it be Brockton High School. I want to see the coaches, and I want to see the referees. Most importantly, I want to see the parents to tell their kids, pull your pants up, tuck your shirt in, and tie your drawstrings. You're going to play better. There's nothing worse than going to a high school basketball game, wherever it may be, and being an adult in the stands watching a game where kids are running around as though they're playing out in the street. Their pants, how low they go. And I'm beside myself, to be honest with you, that the coaches at the high school level and the officials don't tell the kid, pull your pants up and tie your drawstring. You're going to play better. you're going to look better.
I can
You're going
agree
to
with
succeed. You're going to be better. That's what I want to see happen in Brockton this season.
It's funny for me, when I went to Brockton High School, graduated in '91, I was kind of a liberal punk rock kid, so I definitely wasn't the norm. Right. But I will say I totally agree with Todd about dress codes. It does work, absolutely. And this is a bigger issue. So what we're proving here, and the school got better by the way people looked. So if we address the way we look in the city, maybe the city will improve
We're going to do
too.
this kind of quickly, Mr. Lucas.
Yeah, and it's it's a larger issue probably than dress code. It's just making sure that people have a sense of self-respect and self-pride.
Self-respect and discipline.
And that's what a dress code gives
You
you.
have lost discipline all the way down the line.
Right, and whether you had to do a dress code or some other measure, but you need to have self-respect, and I think that we need to get that message across. And I think you can do that by not only talking to the people who are largest offenders, but also taking respect in how you operate yourself as an
Bring back the
individual.
nuns with the sticks.
Yeah.
Lawsuit.
Exactly.
The old adage, this is Robert Sullivan, the old adage was dress for success. And, when I played football at Brockton High, Coach Colombo, I'm in Colombo, you had your shirt tucked in. And when I played CYO basketball at Lady of Lords, you had your shirt tucked in. So I think at the end of the day, again, it goes back to probably a thought process and a new wave of generation where the kids don't really, look at it the way that we did. I mean, you see that in computer games. They're not out there playing after school in the yard like we did. They're out there on the computers. And maybe there's a correlation to childhood obesity. Who knows? But I think at the end of the day, we're in it for the right reasons. All Brockton people. That's why you're on the radio every day. That's why we're running for office. It takes a lot to put your name on a ballot. And everybody should be commended. But I concur with you, Todd. I think Dr. Zackwitz, Susan Zackwitz at Brockton High has just initiated a program, and if you don't do it, you're going to be in trouble. So Dr. Zack and it's just kudos to her. On Monday, the Boston Globe did a great article about the MCAS score. Well, is there a correlation between dressing for success and the philosophy of I can succeed versus the MCAS scores? I think there probably is.
Okay. We need to take a break. We'll be right back after this.
BCA internships are offered to all college students who want to learn the basics in TV and video production. Typically, BCA internships are from 9 to 18 hours per week. BCA offers in-studio work, which includes participation in cyclical TV production from pre, during, and post-production. For more information on this great opportunity, visit our website at bcatv.org.
I could talk to you guys for hours, but we're not going to do that.
I have one final.
Go on.
And that is, and I got to ask it. If I don't, then I'm not doing my job. We know that I think maybe as of today or sometime this week, the Brockton Rocks, who are right now renting out a beautiful stadium, a conference center, are probably this close to defaulting. In your estimation, what should be done? Should the city once again forgive their debt? Should the city have, is there anything that you know, whether you're elected or you're looking to be elected, that's on the books that the city of Brockton cannot look and see where their money is going? I mean, they're bringing people in as concessions. They collect parking fees from the high school in order to park. I know I've paid it a few times myself. What should be done? And if they're gone, if they're not able to pay their rent, what do you think we do?
Well, Todd Petty, thank you very much. With regard to the Brockton Rocks, this would be the first payment in 96 payments that they have been unable to make if they do, in fact, don't make it. So the city, Jay Condon, and I know the mayor are working with the Rocks and the 21st Century Corporation to come to a resolve. The Shaw Center is doing well. The Rock situation is a different story, and I'm not going to beat down the Rocks. There's no one.
No one beating them down, but it's a reality.
Yeah, it is a reality, but it also has to do with the times we're in, whether it's money, disposable income to go down to Foxwoods or Mohegan Sun, or whether it's $4 to get into a Rocks game. People are cutting back. It wasn't the best weather we had this past summer. So all these different ingredients put together for the perfect storm. So I'm gonna wait until we hear from our CFO to see what options there are, and hopefully the Rocks will be able to make that payment and stay in Brockton. But the stadium itself is probably is a jewel in the city of Brockton. It is an asset. People would love to have that. The high school, it's great to play there, and we're going to do whatever we can to maintain it.
I do think it's an asset in the city, and thanks for saying that. I think it's an asset.
Commentary.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's an asset in the city, and we have to figure a way to if the team doesn't survive itself, we have to figure a way to bring another team here. But we definitely have to continue the use of the stadium. I have a number of friends who don't live in the city, and all that they know of Brockton is the Brockton Rocks. And if you think about what's been brought here over the past year, you had Jenny Finch, a national softball player, come here. You had Jason Aldean, a national country singer, and you had the Jonas Brothers, who I have no idea who they are, but they're a pretty big deal.
They snuck in and snuck out.
But they're a pretty big deal.
They're huge.
But you had for those instances, you had Brockton being mentioned in a positive light,
right.
And that's promotion that you really can't buy. So we have to figure a way, whether it's extending their payments, if they're willing to stay in business, and if not, then we'd have to figure out not only how we can maintain a team here, but look at other teams and other sports to use for that stadium.
Seven.
Yeah, no, I think the Brockton Rocks, first of all, it's great family entertainment. I take my son Tommy, he's only 2.5, my wife Maria. I mean, for the money that you paid to get admission, it's a great take. It's great baseball. But at the end of the day, it's a business, and I mentioned this last night during the debate. America's pastime has changed. It's a business now. It's dollars. I run my own law office here in Brockton. If I can't pay my bills, I'm going to go belly up. If my wife and I can't pay our monthly expenses, we're going to lose our house. So I think you have to look at the Brockton Rocks independent baseball historically. Those years where they exist are short in number. So, the days of Willie Nelson and Bob Dylan coming to the Rock Stadium, that was great. Duran Duran, Bryan Adams, these people came. Jack Johnson. I mean, I went to all those concerts, and that was great for Brockton. But I have gone on record at the city council, and last night, and I'll do it right now, I, in good faith, as an elected official, would not vote to bail out the Brockton Rocks. It's a business. It's a great stadium. It is a gym, but we need to attract another affiliated Major League Baseball team like Lowell did, the Lowell Spinners. And during tough economic times, you need to make tough decisions, and I understand you have to give and take, but I wouldn't give on that one, because at the end of the day, money was forgiven. And I wasn't on the council, but I would have fought the former mayor, Mayor Eunice at that time. I don't think that was the right thing to do. Legally, he could do it, but I wouldn't have agreed to that. And also, West Little League lost Baron-Selly Field, and there was a promise made that they would get Baron-Selly Field. They didn't. They just got a plaque, and the girls' softball team is now called Baron-Selly Field. That wasn't the deal. So my view is, if you say something, you agree to it, you abide by it.
You had Snow Park you could have gotten involved with too, though, no?
Not Baron-Selly, not on the west side. It was promised a new baseball field would be built on the west side.
That's been happening for years in Brockton. Promises and promises and promises, and that's the air of corruption, really, whether it be legal or not legal. It's just promises that go unheard, and that's what we got to change in Brockton. But yeah, I agree with Bob Sullivan about that as being a business. Absolutely, we just listed all these great musicians that went there. There's definitely capital coming in. I honestly don't know enough about their books to say, are they really in trouble or not. By looking at them, what I've learned so far, I can't imagine they're in super bad trouble.
Yeah.
They pay salaries, they've had all these events there, and yeah, they haven't had a great baseball year. And yeah, I had season tickets for 3 years right behind home plate. It's a great place to bring people that come to Brockton. I've got a lot of friends around the community that go there. But honestly, we can't bail them out. No. I'd much rather bail out a small business in downtown that wants to open up a bookstore or maintain a little bar that's really funky, or an art show, or anything of that nature. But they're a big business, and you know what? They had a lot of promises for the city of Brockton that haven't been met.
Yeah. We've only got about 2-3 minutes. We're not going to do any closing statements, but I think the public really should know. You all seem to get along pretty good. You all think you're qualified.
Absolutely, yeah.
So why don't it just be you four? Why don't you just vote for these four? But no.
Yeah.
I'm not allowed to do that. But at the same time, what is your shining quality that puts you back in the seat or gets you into a seat?
Oh, thank you very much, Ron. Again, this is Todd Petty. I'm a third-generation Brocktonian. Went to Brockton Public Schools, graduated from Brockton High School in 1978. I'm a United States Navy veteran from 1978 to 81, and I served over at the former South Weymouth Naval Air Station in the reserves for 3 years, from 81 till 84, and I was honorably discharged. My grandfather opened up Petty's Market.
What's the reason that the seat would, for
Well,
what's your shining quality?
Well,
'Cause we're not doing it-
the shining quality is that my family has a vested interest in the city of Brockton. My grandfather opened up his business 27 years after the city of Brockton received its charter in 1881, and we maintained the business in Brockton since then.
So it's an addition to the city.
It's a big addition to the city, and I also, in the past 14 years as being on the city council,
Right.
I believe I've advocated and I've worked strongly for all residents of the city of Brockton.
Mr. Quinn?
Again, Patrick Quinn, fourth-generation Brocktonian. For me, it's all about open and transparent government. We don't have that. We need that. Thriving communities have that. Accountability. For me personally, I think there's great people in this room that are on city council. There are other great people. What city council needs is that one person that can be the catalyst to bring the idea and the discussion to policy. I see that over and over again where we talk about great things, but they just don't get there, and that's what I can bring to
So that's
city
your
council.
quality.
Absolutely.
Mr. Lucas?
I think my qualities that I have experience in government. I worked in the federal, state, and local government. I also pretty much, I have my degree in government from Harvard University and my law degree, and I think I have an understanding of how government works and how it can be effective. I've worked in different government agencies, and I've been successful in helping them, and I'd like to be able to take that expertise and put it into Brockton. So
Government
I think it'd be
experience.
my background in government and policy.
Okay. Ms. Sullivan?
Well, I think it's really what have you done since you've been an elected official? The proof is in the pudding. And if you look at when I ran citywide, people said, you were crazy. No one knows you. You're not a good old boy. I never will be. And I'm proud of that. I stand on my principles, my commitment, my integrity. I do it for the right reasons. And I work hard because I'm a public servant. I represent everybody. So I'm going to ask everybody to get out there and vote. And if you look in September, I got over 3,600 votes, which was great. November 3rd, please get out there and vote. And 1 out of 4 votes, if you could consider Robert Sullivan, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, they all asked for your vote in November. Please make an educated decision, and indeed make a decision. Let's turn that poll thing around. Mr. Kevin Tachi, News Director, thank you very much. Brockton Community Access, thank you very much for taping this. Thank you, Mike, for doing everything in the control room. We'll be back with you on Monday. Until then, we wish you peace. Goodbye to you.